interrupt? Sorry, this will make future viewers much happier. Okay, yes, sorry, we have a huge per capita footprint. We have been an active blocker on climate action for decades. We're one of the world's largest exporters of fossil fuels. Yes, we're back in COP with a new government who, yes, it's a market improvement, but we're also continuing to fund the expansion of fossil fuels, and we're pursuing a target that is inconsistent with keeping global warming to below 2 degrees, which we know is what is required in order to, ensure millions of people aren't displaced and become ill and lose their life, and to ensure the survival of our Pacific neighbours as well. So that is really glad that you're all here. I would like to introduce our two speakers today, who are both over in Egypt, Amber Rose Atkinson and Arthur Wyns. I'll throw to you, Arthur, just for a quick intro, and then throw to Amber Rose for a quick intro, and yeah, we can get started.
Hi everyone, sorry, I hope you can hear us. It's quite funny that next to the venue, so it's quite hard sometimes to hear negotiations or hear what's going on, because there's constant planes flying in and out. It's quite ironic. But it's day 4 of the negotiations, day 3. I think we've lost track by now. We're getting pretty tired.
Yeah,
Day 4. The first 2 days had leaders coming. I think there's almost 100 leaders from different countries here. Quite a few announcements, but actually nothing very concrete. And I think generally people are a little bit disappointed with how that went. People had hoped that 100 heads of states coming down to Sharm el-Sheikh would deliver some sort of new commitments or some more information on how people are implementing their commitments. But as far as I can tell, there's not been any new announcements, and there's actually very little detail of some of the announcements that have been made or some of the commitments from previous years as well. So it feels a little bit, at least from my perspective, that the COP is a bit deflated. There's not really a big sense of momentum. The negotiations themselves are going quite slowly. And I think people are getting really impatient on top of everything else. There's just no good access to food, water, internet. So people are getting very cranky, and that's also not really helping the actual negotiations. So it's a tough spot to be in. But I'm really happy to have Amber Rose with us here, and maybe I'll pass over to her.
Yeah, we will go into the crankiness and the food and water shortages I've heard about. But yes, Amber Rose, please introduce yourself.
Kinigay, everyone. I just also like to just have a quick look at who's on the call. I'd just like to say hello, and also pay my respects to my ancestors, and also the ancestors of the lands if you're on so-called Australia, where you're dialing in from. Yeah, should I just do a bit of a quick intro, or?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
So I'm a Pukmagi and Yami from the mid-northeast coast of New South Wales. So Coffs Harbour, that kind of area is my mother's country. We also have connections to Bundjalung and Dangari, which are our northern and southern neighbours. And then on my father's side, I'm Kabi Kabi and Yinabara, which is southeastern Queensland. I'm here with CAHA. And also I was able to get a badge with CAHA, but I'm unable to attend for both weeks, so I'm just here this 1 week. It's my first COP. I'm a second year PhD student. My research is really looking at the relationship between country climate and First Nations people's health. So attending this, this huge sort of chaotic COP has been definitely really useful and insightful to be able to understand the political landscape, and also to see where and how First Nations voices and peoples are positioned within and outside of this. And yeah, I'm writing an article for Croaky, so a lot of my thoughts will kind of go into that, and I'm still kind of formulating, but I've really been using the last few days to get to know as many other First Nations peoples from around the world. We have the largest delegation of or largest representation of First Nations peoples from around the world here for the very first time. I think there's about 170 plus, which is pretty incredible to think of, you know, how important it is to have that representation, but then also to critique like where it is that we're situated in terms of the power lines here at COP. So that's something that I'll really be speaking to, like in the second article that I am article that I'm writing. Yeah, I think that's sort of summarizes me a bit.
That's amazing. Thanks so much, Amber. I had a quick question around who you might have met already. So there's quite a big Indigenous caucus really here. Could you give a quick sense of what kind of nations are represented there? What kind of people are there? Have you met anybody interesting? Or?
Yeah, well, everyone is really, really interesting. There's mob from pretty much every single sort of like region, but it's really great to see mob from areas that are really not often spoken about or heard about, at least in like mainstream Australian media, but also like mainstream global media. Like we have Russian Aboriginal people here, which is really incredible because the fight that they have against the Russian government and the impact of extractive industries on their country is like really prolific. So it's great. I haven't been able to speak with them yet, but I know they're here, and I'm going to try and speak with them and hear their stories, because you know we have governments from all over the world here, but we also have First Nations peoples from nearly like every single country. We've got the Philippines, Thailand, you know, nearly all of the Pacific nations, which IPO has been really responsible for bringing over a lot of mob from Pacific nations. You know, we've got like Guam, New Caledonia, many African nations, many like South American and Turtle Island, Alaska, Canada, Sami people. Like it's just the reach of our custodial network is so vast, and what I really want to do is understand how we can promote that. As you know, when the sessions I've been sitting in, it's really been a lot of mob talking to mob about the issues that are afflicting us, but the only other people in the room are mob, whereas we need to actually be the crux of the power to be able to do that. That's something that I'd be very interested in thinking about further, both at my time here, but beyond this COP, and how we can interrogate that, because change for us is not going to happen unless we have access to those power lines to disrupt them and subvert them, so that our voices are actually like heard in a way that is meaningful and genuine. And we, you know, I'm sure everyone on this call knows, like if you know, if we have justice for First Nations peoples, we have climate justice. Like the two are synonymous. But what I worry about is that we can have climate justice without justice for First Nations peoples. I hear a lot of like nature-based solutions with zero mention of First Nations peoples in any respect or capacity or anything like that. So I'm really fearful that that is, you know, and that plays to the dominant discourse of, which is what I'm about to speak to actually in soon.
30 minutes.
Yeah, which is, you know, about challenging the dominant discourse around climate change and how it's void in terms of like power relations of our voices. So yeah. So that's kind of an observation that I've just for me.
On that, just a further question on this. I know there's a lot of negotiations going on carbon markets and setting up a global carbon market, and that seems quite problematic as well. And I know Australia is actually very keen to see that happening. I think they're even co-chairing the whole discussions. I'm wondering if you have any perspectives on this as well. I've heard from your mob what the worries are and what needs to be in place for that to function, because it seems quite problematic, and I've heard a lot of Indigenous representatives speaking up about this. I don't know if you've heard something.
I attended there's stuff in the chat. I'm a proud, I've been thinking it's, oh, hello Rachel. Oh no, it's Joy. Yeah, I yesterday or the day before, I was at the Australian Pavilion and they spoke to climate finance, which to be honest, I'm not like savvy with. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around that. But definitely there was a session on carbon markets and like carbon abatement programs, and you know, talking about renewables, and there was not once not once was the word, even just the word Indigenous or First Nations brought up at all. Yeah, to me, that just really says a lot, and it kind of reiterates my fears of having climate justice without justice for First Nations people. So, yeah, I think to me, renewables and all that, which, great, but everywhere in so-called Australia is Aboriginal country, and so it's where are those voices, and where are those how is the sovereignty of those peoples whose land that renewables want to build on, where is that going to come into play? So I definitely think renewables are great, but we have to really be careful about how and where and why it's and who gets left behind in that shift, that transition, with fossil fuels, which have horrific impact on the country, and horrific impacts on the mob, and we're just still to this day being so left out of the conversation. So yeah, that's
and there's examples of that happening.
Arthur,
yes.
sorry to jump in. There's just a little bit of the internet is a little bit glitchy.
Sorry.
That's okay. I think I can see it's gone back to white now, the level of connectivity we have. So we'll keep going. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but just you've got the next 4 days to pick Amber Rose's brain. So I'm just gonna quickly just ask one more question of you, Amber Rose. You mentioned you've got a presentation coming up at the WHO Pavilion later today. I'm really excited to share with everyone on the call that presentation will be accessible online, and it starts in 45 minutes, so it's at a time zone that we can access. So I was wondering, Amber Rose, if you could just tell us a little bit about what you'll be talking about at that presentation, and then I'll send a link for people to jump on at 7 o'clock if they want to watch it as well.
Yep, it's the theme is climate change education for health professionals. So I'm really just speaking to basically decolonizing climate change curriculum, and embedding, advocating for First Nations perspectives to be, well, I guess not just climate change curriculum, but also the decolonization of curriculum in general, and advocating for it to be context specific. We need, the health professional space is such an important area where we can have real advocates to be our ally, to be first and to be our allies in response to the threats of climate change, which disproportionately impact us. And health professionals see that impact very directly. But it's about, for me, ensuring that health professionals have access to and are engaged with climate change education that acknowledges the context of climate change education in Australia. Acknowledges the context of climate change in Australia, which is a symptom of colonisation. So you cannot have climate change education without acknowledging the socio-political historical context of the place which that's being taught. So it's about really interrogating dominant discourse and interrogating the climate health curriculum. So that's kind of what I'm going to be speaking to, which I think I have to potentially pop off soon because we're a little bit in the pavilion. But
no worries. If you need to pop off now, if I can just have Arthur to finish off, or if you're both able to stick around for the next 10 minutes, that's great.
So I see that Jess has also joined us. So we have another special guest for today, which is
awesome.
Global Climate and Health Science. So
awesome. I'll just answer Melissa's question on will there be a recording of Amber Rose's event? Yeah, so WHO is making all those events accessible online at the same link. So you should be able to watch it. Jess, I'll just pull you up. Just trying to find you so I can. Hi, Jess. Oh, I'll mute you guys. Hi, Jess. How are you?
I'm doing really well, Remy. Thank you. How are you?
Really good. Really good to see you again. I see Jess about this time every year in relation to COP. Jess, do you want to introduce yourself? We've got a group of probably largely Australian health professionals with us today. And this is, yeah, just our debrief to keep them in the loop of how things are going. If you could introduce yourself and give sort of your top line takeaways so far and what it is day 4 of the conference.
Yeah, sure. And stop me if I'm repeating what's been said already. So I'm Jess Spiegley. I'm the policy lead with the Global Climate and Health Alliance. I sit in the UK, but I'm really lucky to work with lots of wonderful people all around the world. And this year in the lead up to COP, we've been developing some policy recommendations from the health community about how health fits with what's on the COP27 agenda. So there's no agenda item on health at this COP or indeed at any other COP. So it's really about thinking how we can use health as an argument for ambitious climate action. So some of the things that have happened so far and that you've probably heard a little bit about already is that for the first time, there's been a dedicated agenda item agreed to be included, and that's on a loss and damage finance facility. So lots of discussions about loss and damage, which is where health impacts fit, have been so far about sort of technical assistance for countries. But if a country is experiencing loss and damage, it does need technical assistance, but more crucially, it needs finance. And it's been a real political struggle to see that included on the agenda. So the fact that it's now on the agenda is a great opportunity. It doesn't mean it's a done deal, and we won't know probably until 2024 what that financing structure will look like and how much finance will be available. We've seen that there are countries that are making finance commitments for loss and damage, but often this is taken from finance that had already, well, sometimes this is taken from finance that's already been allocated to mitigation and to adaptation. And if we're not financing mitigation and adaptation, then we're going to see more and more losses and damages. So essentially, we're financing the stuff that's happening further down the road. In terms of the global stocktake, which is the process to monitor delivery of the Paris Agreement that was adopted back in 2015, there's a real opportunity to include health as sort of a cross-cutting way to measure the progress on the Paris Agreement. So the global stocktake is broken down into mitigation, so whether or not we're delivering on limiting warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius and preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Then to adaptation, also including loss and damage. And the Paris Agreement mentions the global goal on adaptation. It's not very well defined, but it is also in the Paris Agreement. And then on means of implementation to achieve all of those goals. So in terms of where health fits, we're really trying to frame health as a universal indicator for action across sectors, because if we're mitigating across sectors, then not only are we reducing health impacts, but we're also probably yielding health co-benefits. So in the energy sector, if we mitigate and we transition to renewable energy sources, then we're going to see improvements in air quality, which is great for health. In transport, if we shift from fossil fueled motorized vehicles to active transport modes and more public transport, then we'll see increases in physical activity as well as those reductions in air pollution. And in food systems, if we promote healthy, sustainable diets and those are accessible and affordable for people, then we'll see not only reductions in emissions, but also improvements in health. So those are the mitigation co-benefits. And then on the adaptation side, if we've got resilient water and sanitation systems, then it ensures that people have potable water to drink. Again, resilient agricultural systems are great for protecting against food and nutrition insecurity and undernutrition. And if we've got healthy and resilient cities, then that's not only going to protect people from climate, but often also wider adaptation benefits as well. I'm not sure how much you want me to talk for, and I might have put everyone to sleep already. So
that's great, Jess. Thank you. What I might ask you and Arthur and Rose is just for a bit of a feeling of what it's like in Egypt. I've heard a lot of, I've seen a lot of reports and heard in a previous chat from the Australian delegation that the access to food and water is actually pretty dicey. And it's very hot, and food is very poor and expensive, and it's making actually aspects of the negotiations hard because people are cranky. It'd be great to get some insight of what it's like there in Sharm.
Yeah, sure. So there's, I think, an ample number of food stalls, but the queues for them are horrendously long. And if you're from a party with a relatively small delegation, it's really challenging for people to be able to put across the points that they need to put across and be in a negotiation room and fuel themselves for the next negotiation. And typically the parties with the smallest delegations are the ones that most urgently need climate action. So really basic lack of access to fuel in the food and nourishment sense is a really big challenge. Lunches here are typically sort of $20, which is really not affordable for many people, civil society, and
It's,
more vulnerable nations.
That's in US dollars, so that's 45 Australian approximately. So yeah, keep going.
Thanks,
Wow.
Amber Rose.
Okay, yeah, that's massive.
It's not cheap. It's not cheap. And yeah, generally really poor options for vegan food in particular. Not so bad on the vegetarian food front, but yeah, and that's in Sharm el Sheikh in general, not just in the venue. And so pretty challenging for a lot of the climate community.
And
Thanks, Jess.
it's sort of part of our
Arthur,
day at the moment, but when complaining about these things, I have gotten quite a bit of pushback from our colleagues from the Global South saying, well, I mean, yes, that's all annoying, but we're here to negotiate our future. So let's not make that the headline story of COP, that there's no access to food and water, because this is, for many people, their day-to-day reality already. So yeah, it's just, I feel there's a lot of discussion around these issues, and it's important because we are here for 2 weeks, but it's really nothing compared to what we're actually trying to discuss here as well. So it is useful to get that feedback from negotiators around here as well. It's like, yes, that's a distraction. Let's keep focusing on what we're actually here to talk about as well, and keep grounded in what we're fighting for.
Very good perspective. Thank you for sharing. The only thing I'd say is I've heard that actually, and I haven't had this confirmed, but I wonder what you think. I've heard that at the UNFCCC Bureau meeting today, that this is an issue that's going to be raised, and I guess then that's time being discussed with really high level negotiators on the sort of logistics of the conference itself that should be spent on the negotiations of the nitty gritty. I don't know if you've heard similar that that's going to be part of the discussion today.
I haven't heard that, but yeah, that's interesting. But again, yeah, it's a distraction, and so quite a few negotiators are getting very frustrated that they have a lot to discuss, and this is now just something that is distracting from the main discussion. So yeah, I guess that sort of feeds into the chance that this might not deliver a really good outcome at COP.
Thanks for sharing, guys. The other thing, this morning I was part of a call where the Climate Action Network, not this morning, an hour ago, I don't know what I'm talking about, was part of a call where we met the new Australian ambassador for climate change, Miss Kristen Tilley. I saw you were also in that meeting with her, Amber Rose. Just a report back, it was all very diplomatic, as you'd expect, but her report back was regarding Pacific Islands that they keep saying to the Australian delegation that they're glad we're back, and say that we're sort of starting from the conversation from a place of mutual respect. But that's kind of not in line necessarily with some of the things that are coming out in the media that are saying that Australia is really not doing good enough, particularly coming from Pacific Islands. Wondering if you've heard any rhetoric sort of in relation to how others are sort of seeing Australia placed at the conference.
I don't think so just yet. Definitely more so around, I guess, you know, access to badges and then support for Pacific delegates when they're here. And I think that there's a lot more work that the government can do to support that, and also more broadly organisations, because, you know, where First Nations peoples, you know, in Australia as well, but also our Pacific brothers and sisters are often the first to be impacted with the last we had. And it's just, yeah, I've heard that it's been a bit difficult in comparison to other COPs, I think, in terms of feeling really supported and then being able to, from that support, go forth to strategize and mobilize their agenda whilst over here.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, especially if Australia is hoping to co-host the Pacific COP. There is a lot of work to be done to build up that capacity and that trust and that relationship with the broader Pacific family from now on, all the way to COP31. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, but I don't how that looks like. There's a lot to cover. Like a lot of who I've been speaking with, the issues that they're talking about are issues that I don't think the Australian government is like ready to back, especially when it's around like intense oppressive militarization of some of our Pacific and also Asian neighbors. So it's like some of the stories that I'm hearing are like really horrific, and I'm not sure what that relationship's going to look like, and if it's actually, the words that are being used and that were used this morning were about like genuine and all that kind of stuff, but what does that actually really look like in practice when we have some of our First Nations brothers and sisters getting arrested for protecting and caring for their country? So I'm very interested to kind of watch and see how this plays out in practice, how this genuine relationship plays out in practice.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm aware it's 6:30 and you guys have to run to the WHO Pavilion for a very special event. Thank you so much, Jess, for jumping on and giving us sort of a global climate health update. Thank you, Amber Rose and Arthur, for jumping on as part of the CAHA delegation. It's so great to hear from you both. Just again, if anyone wants to watch Amber Rose do her thing in half an hour at the WHO Pavilion, you can follow it live there. There will be a recording there later. We've put together a list of climate and health events and how you can follow them on the CAHA website. I'll just share the link in here. And we've got these calls next Monday, so feel free to invite people if you think they're interesting. And sorry, it was a bit of a packed agenda today, so I didn't get much time for questions, but next time. And for everyone at Charm, go and have a good day. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
See you, folks.